This is Matt Rosen, and this is the Grit Mindset with me, your host, Matt Rosen. The mission of the Grit Mindset is to inspire and empower our listeners by delving deep into the journeys of those who have faced significant challenges and emerged stronger. Through authentic conversations, we uncover the mindsets, strategies, and lessons that have propelled these individuals to overcome adversity and achieve success. My aim is to provide actionable insights and real-world advice to help our listeners cultivate their own grit and navigate their personal and professional lives with confidence and resilience. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of the Grit Mindset. I'm your host, Matt Rosen. Here with me in the studio today is a friend and former client of mine. Her name is Joan Kuehl, and I'm excited to have her on the show and hear her story. Welcome to the show, Joan.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah. Well, so you had a great career as a CIO, both in, I believe, North Carolina, here in Dallas,
Yeah.
and tell us about what you're doing right now, and then we'll kind of rewind the story a little bit.
Yeah, so I retired from full-time employment about 3.5 years ago. Now I'm serving on a corporate board, 2 nonprofit boards, and I'm doing a lot of grandparenting.
Yeah, that must be fun.
Yeah, it's great.
Probably keeps you busy.
It does.
So, and we'll talk about one of the organizations, but we got really involved through EWL, or
Yes.
Empowering Women Leaders, which I understand you've chaired for, 7 years now?
Yes, yep.
Yeah, so before we leave, we need to talk about that and all the great things it does for
I'd love
folks
to.
in North Texas here. So tell us a little bit about your story and how you got to be where you are.
So very normal childhood, grew up in a family with 4 siblings, and my dad I learned a lot from both of my parents. My dad was amazing. He grew up in a very, very poor family, 13 siblings.
Wow.
Yeah, I have 60 plus first cousins.
No kidding, that's huge.
Yeah. And he, in high school, started out part-time pushing broom at a company that he ended up as president of.
Wow.
So he's just an amazing leader. My mom was incredibly smart and really capable. And so I learned a lot from them. Went on to college at what we call the Harvard of the Appalachians, West Virginia University. Got my computer science degree at a time when there weren't a lot of women in that field. So it was interesting to try to break into a field with no women, and especially I saw no women leaders until halfway through my career. I never had a female boss until I was in my 50s. So it was challenging at times.
Well, it sounds like your parents had a really positive influence. What did you kind of learn at an early age watching your dad go through that process?
Just he never gave up. I think he's a great example of grit. He built this company from a small company to a multi-million-dollar company.
What did they do?
They sold concessions. They sold popcorn, Coca-Cola to Three River Stadium, to 50 theaters. It was just an interesting business. And I worked at a refreshment stand every summer of my life.
So you were part of the family business or part of that business?
That's right. But I just watched his work ethic, and he taught me so many lessons. I can remember one time, this sounds silly, but it really affected me. Someone introduced themselves to my dad as, "Joan works for me." And my dad told me later, "You don't work for him. Nobody works for you. You work for your family. You work for yourself. You work with that person." And that's the kind of mindset that always stuck with me.
I think that's really important because at least here in America, everyone's pretty much a volunteer.
Yeah.
They can get up and walk with their feet to another job anytime they want. And so I think as leaders, it's important to always keep that in mind.
Yeah.
So you grew up working concessions, decided that's not what you wanted to do full time, sounds like.
Yep. Decided to pursue computer science. Got my first job out of school at NCR, and was in an interesting division. NCR was huge with ATMs at the time, and they decided they wanted to take those self-service into other industries. So we built a self-service terminal for airlines, and one for gas stations, and one for hotels. We were a little ahead of our time. I think the gas station one took off. Airlines didn't take off for quite a while, but it gave me a chance to bring the machine into American Airlines to have it certified, and then they asked me to come and work for them, and I worked for American Airlines and then Sabre, when Sabre spun out of AA, for the bulk of my career. 22 years I was there, and went from an assembly programmer who did their first voice response system. Probably nobody out here remembers assembly programming.
I barely remember assembly. I was replacing it when I got into this business.
And then had pretty much every technical job at Sabre during my 22 years, and had amazing opportunities to grow and to lead major projects. It was really a great opportunity.
So talk about what it was like breaking into what was primarily a male-dominated field at the time, as a female professional. Like, talk about what that was like and some of the challenges you had to overcome.
Yeah, I would say 80% of the meetings I was in, I was the only female. As I mentioned, never had a female boss, so that it was hard to find role leaders that I could follow. There was some prejudice at the time. There were some people who thought women shouldn't be in the industry, or if they were, they should be project managers and not serious technologists. So got a little pushback, but frankly, I also think it was an opportunity. As I started to do well and exceed, I stuck out, and so I got opportunities maybe that I wouldn't have had. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. It worked both ways. I think the thing I missed most was just not having any female leaders to learn from and to emulate.
Were you able to find any role models outside of Sabre or other places that you could follow, or did they just not really exist?
I could, but not in the technology field.
Yeah.
So I had a couple mentors that were great, and frankly, I had some great male mentors as well. But it's interesting. It's not getting better, it's getting worse. Back when I graduated in the 80s, about 25% of computer science degrees went to women. Today, it's 18 or 19%. So we've made negative progress, yeah.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah, and it seems to be tied to the introduction of the PC. When the PC first came out, all of the games, all of the programming were geared at boys. And so boys got ahead of girls in their technology education. And then girls were afraid to join in high school because they were so far behind.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. And I'm trying to get, my girls are 11 and 14 and trying to get them programming a little bit and understanding computers, because I think it's a great career path. And hopefully, females that are listening can hopefully inspired by your story here today that you're sharing with us. So talk about, whether it be Sabre or, places you went after that, maybe a specific, challenging story, or I hate to say failure, I like the word opportunity, but talk us through a difficult situation that you had to work through.
Probably the one that's most striking, I was in 1998, US Airways decided to outsource all of their system to Sabre. It was 106 different systems and applications. And they had to, because so many of them were so interrelated, about 80 of them had to cut over on the same night.
Oh, wow.
My boss came to me and asked me to lead the program. It had 6,000 Sabre people on it at its height. There were 1,000 or 1,200 US Airways people on it. And I just didn't feel qualified. I didn't think I had enough experience. So I turned him down, which was pretty stupid. And he called me the next day and asked me again, would I do this? And I said, Brad, I just don't feel ready. On day 3, I realized he wasn't asking. So it was one of only 2 times in my entire life I cried in my boss's office when I realized I had to take this on. Plus our kids were 5 and 9, and I had to be in Washington, D.C. every Sunday night through Thursday night for 58 weeks. It was tough. But anyway, it was the best thing I ever did. I learned skills I never thought I would know. I learned how to lead very large groups of people. We learned how to organize things. And in the end, the project was very successful. The team did amazing. And everybody on that team had such grit. I mean, they were working crazy hours, but everyone got done in time and turned out great. Changed the trajectory of my career. But if my boss hadn't been smart enough to keep pushing me, it would have turned out differently for me.
Any challenges you overcame during that project? I imagine there were probably many other than being away from your family, but organizing, 8,000 people and 80 systems cut over like that. I mean, that's pretty risky, especially when you have planes would fall out of the sky if you didn't get it right. Yeah,
it was just the whole methodology. We had never done anything that large, so defining a methodology, and especially, as you mentioned, the cutover. That cutover night was daunting. There were 22 aircraft in the air with about 1,500 souls on board, and they were going to take off under one system and land under another. The bag would be checked in under one system and sorted on the other. So it was daunting. And we designed this amazing kind of cutover methodology where each department in the airline and each department in Sabre would have a go or no go vote. And it was an all-night affair. At 2 a.m. we unplugged US Airways data center and plugged it in Sabre's Tulsa center, and
everyone landed and got their bags.
Yes. And we really kind of worried about how many bugs we'd have, how much we had missed in testing. And it was not flawless, but they were, minor bugs that we were able to fix in the next couple weeks. So
yeah, you mentioned the trajectory of your career. Where did things go from there?
I was promoted to senior vice president at the time, and given a responsibility for all major projects like that at Sabre. So the next thing I did was we converted Pakistan International Airlines over to Sabre.
Did you have to go to Pakistan for that?
Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you, I had 22 employees in country on the time that the coup occurred when Musharraf came into power. And because PIA is a national airline, the government owns it, the whole regime, the whole management team at PIA was ousted, and Musharraf brought his people in, and our people were stuck in country for 3 days. They shut down all the airspace and all the airplanes. And that was probably the worst day of my career, having to call 22 wives and moms and let them know, we're sorry.
Yeah.
Your son or your daughter is stuck in Pakistan. We will find them a way out. But it was scary.
That's going to be a rough phone call.
Yeah.
And 22 of them in a row.
Yeah.
Well, we're kind of at a point in the show where I always like to ask all our guests, you're on the grit mindset. What does grit mean to you?
Persistence, stick-to-itiveness, never give up attitude. But it's also thinking about anticipating what obstacles you might have, what problems might happen, and not being afraid to change your path. Still headed to the same goal, but you have to constantly be examining what you need to do differently and then making those adjustments. You talked about the nonprofit we work with, the women that we serve, and we can talk about them later if we have time, have such amazing grit. They've been through terrible life circumstances and they still keep pushing through.
No, it's amazing. We'll definitely make sure we get to that.
Yeah.
You mentioned these huge teams, thousands of people. Is anything you've done or seen to kind of instill grit within the teams, within them?
Yeah, I think, first of all, hiring for somebody, having this kind of conversation and knowing that someone has grit is important. But I also found it's really important for people to understand the impact of what they're doing. Sometimes when you're a programmer or an engineer working on the back room, you don't see the link between what you're doing and how it impacts the business or the customers. And so I've always tried to make it really impactful for people to understand what they're doing makes a difference. And that seems to instill a lot of grit. On that US Airways project, it was so critical because it had to be done by a certain date or we'd miss Y2K. And people worked themselves, tired. But they were all so dedicated. They knew it had to happen, and they were going to get it done.
No, that's a great story, and thanks for sharing those thoughts with us. So you kind of wrapped up at Sabre. What happened next?
I took a job with Bank of America, decided it was time to do another industry, moved to Charlotte. I had a couple different jobs there. The last one I had was running their online banking, and we created their very first mobile app, which that was another project that took a lot of grit. There were so many new things we had to tackle. First of all, just convincing the security people and the risk people, and that we could have a mobile app that was safe and secure. And then once we finally got it done, getting them into the app stores, it was still very early. It was, I think,
what year was this?
2008.
Okay.
And mostly the app stores were full of games. So when we took it to Apple and had it certified, they said, okay, here's the rules. We work 5 days a week from 8 to 5, and then we take 2 weeks off at Christmas. We said, that's not going to work. If we have a security flaw, we need to change it immediately. So just kind of navigating through all of those different things and adjusting our plan as we went along was exciting.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like that was a really interesting adventure, launching the mobile face for Bank of America. What did you do after that?
Moved to Connecticut to go to work for Travelers Insurance. Insurance companies were kind of far behind in the digital space. And so they brought me in as a CIO to work across all lines of business to try to introduce the practices, web, mobile, social. And they actually used social in some interesting ways. They used it in claim investigations. They used it to help evaluate people and underwrite people. So it was interesting to kind of help them come into the
So if someone was claiming disability, see if they were playing basketball on their Facebook app.
Exactly.
Any fun stories like that you found, or any you're allowed to tell?
The only fun story I remember is they also have a big medical practice, and they were giving people Fitbits to try to stay fit. And these were people who were on workers' comp, and you have to walk a certain amount a day. They found out people were attaching it to their dog's leash. The dog was turning around. Somebody put it in the dryer. We had to call an ambulance because we thought the guy's temperature was 150. So people will do crazy stuff.
Yeah, they will. That's funny. So you wrapped up with travels, then you came back here to Dallas, right?
Came back here to Dallas after our kids came back after college. We came back and I worked for a very small fintech company as their CIO, and then brought in. A couple years in, I brought in my replacement because I knew I wanted to retire, and it was someone I had worked with at Sabre, and he's doing fabulous.
Yeah, I know he's a great guy. We know him and have worked with him. So I'd be curious to know, you didn't have a female role model within IT. Talk about how you've been a role model for others, because that's how we got to know each other, was when you're a client, but then also through EWL. So talk about how you've tried to give back to all the women that are trying to forge a career in IT.
I was really lucky. When I was at Bank of America, they asked me to kick off a program called Women in Technology, which we wanted to promote and retain and educate women and help them move up the career ladder. So, and that turned out to be a really helpful, successful organization. So when I went to Travelers, I did the same thing. I started a women technology group there and did the same thing at Elevate. I've always mentored women, and as you mentioned, when I came back here, I got involved with EWL. EWL was founded by a woman I worked with in the past who didn't go to college at the typical age. She got married early and was divorced by 25, and she was lucky enough that her parents put her through school, but she's passionate about women being able to go back to school who can't afford it. So we give scholarships and mentors to women over the age of 23 who are pursuing their bachelor's degree. And it's been amazingly successful. About 2/3 of the women are first-generation college students.
That's awesome.
So the mentor is really as important to them or more important than the money. They just don't know the basics about how to navigate the university system, how to prepare for a job. So their mentor stays with them through graduation, and many of them stay on for years afterwards. But 92% of the women in the organization graduate with an average GPA of 3.5. We've given away $500,000 in scholarships so far.
That's awesome.
Have some just amazing women we had women who made bad choices in their lives and may have ended up in addiction. We had women who were incarcerated. We had a woman who married her high school sweetheart, put him through divinity school. They had a son. They were married for 20 years, and the day the son turned 18, the preacher told his wife, "I'm in love with the church secretary, and I'm leaving you. And by the way, the house is in foreclosure."
Oh, no.
She put herself through college, and she is a working, very happy person right now. Just, amazing. People who were living in their cars. It's just some of the things that they have overcome just bring tears to your eyes.
Yeah, it's amazing. We've sponsored that luncheon here in Dallas, and my understanding is it's now in 5 different cities you guys are operating?
Yes. Now Dallas, Fort Worth, Austin, Houston, and Denver. And you guys have been great. I think you've been sponsoring us 5 or 6 years. We really appreciate it, and it makes such a difference.
Any stories of grit? You told one, but curious if there's some others of women that have come through that program and you're really proud of the success they've achieved.
Yeah, we have women whose parents were murdered. We had one woman who was in an abusive relationship in California. She had 11 children.
Oh my goodness.
She finally turned her husband in, and she and her 11 kids got on a bus and came to Fort Worth where she had family. When her first 2 children started college, she said, "I could do this too." And so she applied at TWU and started, and she's one of our stars and is now working in the medical field. We have 2 women in med school. We have several women with PhDs. We have a woman who started her own business here in Dallas, a design business. So it's so cool to watch people blossom.
That's really awesome. Well, we'd love to have a couple of them come on the Grit Mindset and share their story.
That would be great. Yeah, I think they could really share some stories.
That would be great to have them on. Are there other organizations you're involved with that you can talk about? Or?
No, I'm on a corporate board for a technology company and do some volunteer work up in Denton near where we live. But that's the only corporate board I serve on.
Got it. So most of your time spent now chasing grandkids and doing EWL. Now, have you served? Do you serve as a mentor to? You call them stars, right?
We do, yeah. Yes, in fact, I have 3 right now, which is probably too many. But I fall in love with these women and their stories and what they're able to do. So
yeah, it sounds like all of them are very gritty.
Yeah, for sure.
So we talked about there really being a shortage of women going into computer science and IT. What are some words of wisdom you would give to women who are listening to the show, who are kind of considering what career to go down, or maybe unsure, and why IT is a great path, and maybe whatever stories or you could share with them would be helpful.
Yeah, I would say don't be afraid. I think women get scared off because boys usually are ahead of them. They usually start learning early. Don't be afraid. There are some organizations now that can really help, like Girls Who Code and a few other organizations that are really helpful. It is a great career. I was unsuccessful in talking either of my daughters into going into technology, but it affords you the ability often to work from home. It affords you the ability to change your schedule somewhat. And I think it is, they are now anxious for women to come in, and there are opportunities for them to grow. So I would really encourage women to consider it as a career.
Yeah, I'm asking my daughters to take a hard look at it. One of them says she wants to be an engineer, but I don't know if she knows what that actually means yet. But she's good at math and science, so hopefully that'll work out. So what did your daughters end up doing?
Very traditional female roles.
Yeah.
One's in RN and one's in nonprofit.
Yeah, well, those are great callings.
They are.
Any other stories you can share with us from your corporate life? We talked earlier before the show about maybe stories of failure or learning opportunity that we didn't cover that you'd like to.
I'm sorry.
Nope, nothing. All right. So you talked about being able to travel and do lots of cool things in IT.
Yep.
What brought you back here to the Dallas-Fort Worth area?
After our daughters graduated college, they both moved back here. This was their home. This is where they grew up. And so we're sitting in Connecticut, and they're starting to get to the point of getting married and having kids. And we thought, this is kind of dumb. So and frankly, this was our favorite place to live of all the places we've lived. So came back here, bought 22 acres, and we're trying to be farmers, but learning slowly. We're not great. It
requires a lot of grit to be a farmer in clear land, as I've found.
But really enjoying it, living out in a little small town. And our kids both live within a mile of us, so I get to see the grandkids every single day.
That's awesome. Well, as we kind of wrap up here on the show, are there any kind of final words of wisdom you could share with our listeners, or anything that we didn't cover that you'd like to?
Probably my biggest lesson is don't be afraid. I almost made that huge mistake of turning down a project that changed my life. As you know, maybe you don't, women typically won't apply for a job unless they have like 80% of the qualifications. Men will apply for a job with 40% of the qualifications. So stretch, don't be afraid. Try something, even if it seems a little daunting. 9 times out of 10, it pays off. And if nothing else, you learn a ton from it.
I do have one last question. Anything you would have told the younger Joan that was getting into the workforce to do differently?
I wish I had been a little more balanced. I did, I worked hard, but probably too hard. So I missed some things with my kids growing up. I wish I could go back. I feel like right now with my grandkids, that's my do-over chance. So I get to see them a lot. But I could have accomplished as much without being so absent from my family at times.
Yeah.
I wish I had found that balance sooner.
Well, it's awesome. You have a bunch of grandkids to hang out with, and it sounds like you raised 2 great kids. Well, thank you for coming on the show, and thanks for all you do for the community. I know all the stars love you and what you do for them, and have served as a great mentor to many other CIOs and leaders I know here in DFW. So with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap up this week's episode of The Grit Mindset. This is Matt Rosen signing off. Stay gritty out there.